I want to tell you a true story about a crash that happened in May 2008 when an Airbus A320 crashed when trying to land in the world's most dangerous airport. The flight was scheduled to take off from San Salvador, El Salvador to Miami, Florida in the United States. Before that, they will be stopping at Tegucigalpa and San Pedro Sula, which are both cities in Honduras. So at about 8:14 AM local time, the aircraft is prepared for the first leg to Tegucigalpa, which is a short flight and will take roughly 50 minutes. The aircraft that they are using is 7 years and 6 months old. So the pilot in command is a 40-year-old captain seated on the left, very experienced guy with 11,899 flight hours under his belt and having 8,500 hours on the Airbus A320. He is so used to flying to Tegucigalpa, more than 50 times in fact. The first officer, on the other hand, is much younger, only 26 years old, has about 1,600 flight hours with just 250 hours on the Airbus A320. So far, he has landed 5 times in Tegucigalpa. So, as the pilots were setting up the FNGS, 118 passengers started boarding the plane using the aero bridge. In the cabin, the passengers are assisted with 4 cabin crews. Since the A320 has 4 doors, each cabin crew will manage each door. At about 9:04 AM local time, the pilot set takeoff thrust and began rolling down the runway. At 9:05 AM, the aircraft started lifting off. After 35 minutes being in the air, the pilots prepared the aircraft for an approach to Toncontin Airport in Tegucigalpa. This airport is quite notorious and has a reputation of being one of the most dangerous airports in the world. According to rank, it is rated number 2 most dangerous based on its history of plane crashes. Because it is surrounded by mountains and houses nearby, the pilots have to execute a dramatic 45-degree turn after passing the mountains in order to line up on the runway and land. Before May 2009, the runway length was only 1,863 meters and is situated at 3,307 feet above mean sea level. The pilots would have to perform a steep approach before touching down on the runway. During that time also, the airport still operates using old navigation equipment. So as the aircraft approached the airport, the pilots contacted ATC for descent. As the aircraft is descending, the ATC gave the pilots the weather information of the airport. The information to take note was that the wind speed is 190 degrees at 10 knots and the runway was wet. The aircraft was sequenced to land on runway 02. At 9:22 AM local time, the aircraft started its approach for runway 02 after being cleared by ATC. The pilot started configuring the aircraft, putting out the slats and flaps to increase lift as the aircraft slows down and also lowering the landing gear. And it was raining heavily. The first officer told ATC that the runway was in sight and they were transferred to the tower frequency. The tower then told the pilots that the wind now is at 200 degrees at 6 knots and to report final. The aircraft then started its left turn to line up with the runway, but because the pilots was not happy with the approach, they decided to go around. They were flying too high and too fast. As they go around, the first officer requested to climb to 8,000 feet to intercept radial 008. As they transferred to the approach frequency, ATC told them to climb to 8,000 feet and make a left turn to the vortex. A vortex is simply a VOR that is co-located with a tactical air navigation system called TACA. The combination of the two is called vortex. While civilians use the first 2 signals for the VOR DME, the military will use the last 2 signals for TACA, with the VOR acting as a backup. And so the aircraft climbed to 8,000 feet and circled the runway to try and shoot another approach. As they are circling the mountains, the captain considers landing in San Pedro Airport, which is an airport nearby, just in case the second approach fails. At 9:40 AM local time, the pilots attempt a second approach for runway 02. First officer then told ATC that they have the runway in sight. The approach ATC then asked them to confirm if they want to try and land for runway 02 because the wind now is at 200 degrees at 10 knots, which is a tailwind for them. A tailwind will push the aircraft forward and will eat up a lot of runway. The first officer then said, yes, we request for a circling approach for runway 02 because circling on runway 20 is not possible. The ATC then told them to report when the pilots are at the base leg and inform them that the wind is now at 190 degrees at 10 knots. And so the aircraft was configured to flaps full with the gear down, spoilers armed, and auto brake is set to medium. As they transferred to tower frequency, the pilots were cleared to land on runway 02 wind is at 090 degrees at 10 knots and the runway is damp. The aircraft touched down at 9:45 am and at about 400 meters away from runway 02 displays threshold. The crew selected maximum reverses and spoilers were extended normally. The crew then applied manual braking 4 seconds after the main landing gear touched down and applied maximum braking pressure 10 seconds later. But the pilots soon realized that the plane is not slowing down. Aircraft overran the runway at a speed of 54 knots and dropped down the 20-meter embankment and onto a street. The aircraft was badly damaged. The captain, 2 passengers and 2 occupants in a car was crushed by the aircraft and died. After the crash, the investigators found out that the braking system of the A320 was functioning normally. The aircraft weight, however, was high at about 64.3 tons, as this was the first stop on a long flight. It was calculated that landing on runway 02, dry runway with no wind and flaps full, the maximum permitted landing weight was 66,300 kilograms. On a wet runway, however, the maximum weight allowed was 59,700 kilograms. The aircraft on that day landed with a gross weight of 64,389 kilograms. For that weight and wind and runway condition, the pilots needed 1,807 meters of runway to stop. But on that day, the aircraft touched down 400 meters from the displaced runway. The final report then said that the probable cause of the accident was the decision to land on a runway without proper assessment of the operational conditions. And so, with the aircraft weight, tailwind, short and wet runway, these 3 factors caused the plane to overshoot the runway. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.